just gonna rely on you, and then
So if you folks think it is awkward to watch yourself on camera, or at least I think it is sometimes, it's going to be even more awkwarder, if that's even a word, to watch myself as I watch myself on camera. Because I'm going to watch this show behind the scenes all over again and again judge myself. I've never done a behind the scenes episode before. This is my first roll of the dice. My name's Ali Hirji, and you might remember me as the chair or the co-chair and host of Operation Defend the North. And when you watch Operation Defend the North, you probably think, wow, these folks have it all together and they've got a method to the madness. But I can tell you that there's a lot of things happening and pinball machines playing in our heads as we're going through all of those modules. On Behind the Scenes, we take you through what's actually going on in our heads when Operation Defend the North is taking place. And I couldn't think of a more apt Operation Defend the North than Vancouver to do our first behind the scenes, because I was ably supported by Alex, who was phenomenal on the day off, but in truth actually had no idea of what he walked into. And I also have James, who's going to be joining us at ODTN Calgary, and I actually don't think he knows what he has just about walked into. So hopefully behind the scenes will allow us to show you maybe we know what we've walked into. Alex, it's a pleasure as always to have you. I'm not sure what I'm going to pick on today, but I sure hope you're ready. Good to have you here, Alex.
Thank you, Ali, and ready and willing. Let's do this.
James, it's our first time on a live session together. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this, but at the same time, I think you're going to want to be a little bit on edge because this is the first time you're probably even watching some of these key moments of ODTN. Am I right or am I right? Sounds good. Well, here's the thing. I know we can joke a lot about how ODTN is run, and sometimes, look at those moments and have maybe a cringe moment, or maybe even just a moment full of laughter, or a moment where you're going, "Wow, I was a genius in that moment." But the truth is that in all fairness, and Alex, maybe I'll start with you here before I go into different moments of what happened in Vancouver. I think one of the things that ODTN really gets me to emphasize to my community at large is, we say security is not a product, it's a habit, it's practice. And I think ODTN really gives us an opportunity to really practice that. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of cybersecurity is responding to those bad days. And, ODTN is a perfect example of really testing out when that bad day comes and all the things that are going to go wrong. Even the most prepared companies, the most documented incident response plans are not going to be used as prescriptively as you'd think when we are in the heat of an incident. And that's because the attackers really don't play by our rules. They don't play by our plans. So, it is really about building that muscle memory and building it into the culture of the team and the company when dealing with cyber in general. But also, when a bad day happens, you want to make sure that that team knows how to play well together.
Yeah, and you know what? Here was the other part of it is when I look back at it. So look, and James, this will be sort of good sort of background information for you. You know, when we started the first ODTN in June of 2024 in Toronto, it was all in person. We had just the attendees in person, meaning those playing the actual exercise. Everybody else watched online. But it was one incident. It was how do you respond to the different fallouts that are happening? And we just went on with that narrative. When we did the next one in Toronto, suddenly we were in this theater-like setting. And the theater-like setting, we still, as a group on the stage, we were still sort of locked in on our own. But you know, Alex, that feeling in Vancouver, the room that we were in, and it'll come up very shortly, that UN style room really changed. You felt the pressure. And James, I don't know if this is something you feel, but the minute you start to speak about security or discuss a security incident amongst many other people who may or may not be in your department, it suddenly changes the pressure that you feel. James?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. I think that setting it's because you're really eye to eye with the people that you have to respond to. There's no hiding behind a laptop. There's no real, room to run and hide. So I think that's a lot of it. You really have to be on point and it's, you're always coming back to the, you're the product of not your best made plan, but what happens when you react to it and don't remember everything, right? So I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you've hit it spot on about the word remember. Because one of the things that I can tell you is that we have 5 modules in ODTN. And myself, Alex, and then we have other individuals, other coaches, etc. We're expected to remember this damn flow through the whole thing. And I can tell you, it is not easy. We may make it look that way, but there are certain moments when you actually just have to either recollect or quickly jump on Slack or quickly move in different directions to figure out, well, where were we and how do we bring this back to a narrative? So there's a lot that happens here. And I can tell you, especially for those who are watching, it may look like it's just flowing one step to the other, but there's a lot of things that happen, a lot of curveballs, comments that come in the chat, comments that might come in from the crowd, and you've got to deal with it. But I gotta say, when every module begins with a major prompt, especially a breaking news prompt, it does help you set the context. So you know what? Let's start off over there. When ODTN, the first module, detection, we had our first prompt, and this first prompt came in, very early. So I'm going to ask the siberX team if we can go to like a minute 40 and just play the first prompt. And then I'll talk a little bit about what was going through our heads when the first prompt played out. So hope let's have that first prompt come up, please.
This is Roshan Khan from siberX News. As of 8 a.m., a major telecom outage has been reported, with 80% of affected users in British Columbia. The source of the disruption remains unclear, but industry experts are raising early warnings about potential security vulnerabilities. Authorities are urging caution, and while there is no confirmation of a cyber attack, concerns are growing as this disruption spreads across multiple sectors. With investigations underway, telecom industry is on high alert for further impact. Stay with siberX News as we find out more about this
So
developing
let's just
story.
pause it over there, siberX team. Like we can just pause at any moment now. Alex, look, we had this. I don't know if you recall, and James, this is obviously all news to you, but we had this scenario where we created this telecom company called ODTN Telecom, and they're experiencing an outage. But you know, Alex, what was really challenging for me was the minute this news brief had played, the IT and the security individuals representing ODTN Telecom actually told us that they were not aware of anything at all. And I don't know, did you feel it that even the audience was going like, well, that's weird? And did you feel for a moment that we were going, are we being realistic here or have we lost the plot? Did that ever cross your mind?
Well, the fog of war, the fog of incident response is thick, right? And what we were trying to do in that moment was, suggest that maybe the news knows something that we don't, but also maybe the news is biting onto something that's not real. And we want to point out that whole tail wagging the dog problem, right? Like having the media start setting the narrative. But that said, there are plenty of examples where the media has notified a company of a cyber incident because they weren't aware, they didn't have the detective capabilities, they're already down, thinking it's an IT issue. So we wanted to play on that role, that angle of not a direct source of announcing that there was a threat immediately.
Alex, I agree with you. But boss, can I tell you, that was one thing going through my head. But James, I kid you not, and you're so freaking lucky you're not like the chair. You know what's going through my head? I have three freaking tablets in front of me, and this is the first prompt that's playing. I gotta make sure that I'm taking my cues from AV that the live stream is going through properly and the audio is going through, number one. Number two is I gotta make sure that I queued up the right prompt because AV is waiting on my cue. And then the third thing is I gotta make sure that the minute that prompt ends, I've got to be ready to look into the camera and continue the narrative. So amidst all of this, James, I'm in this situation where I'm going, hold on a second, did I plan this real or did we plan this realistically? And I know Alex kept badgering me about this, right? That, is this real? Is this real? Like, I'm like, yeah, it is real. Like it can happen. But then you start second guessing yourself. And James, I'll tell you, I know this transition and all of that looks smooth, but let me tell you, the minute the lights are on you and you've got to continue the conversation, you start to get a little bit like, whoa, am I going in the right direction? And James, I gotta ask you this. You've moderated a lot of panels. Does that fear also come into you about, can I keep the conversation going or am I going to lose everybody? Does that ever creep into you?
Absolutely. I think there's a little bit of the imposter syndrome that always comes in every time you're coming into those, because you're meant to be the jack of all trades. You're meant to be that person that's, keeping the flow running and keeping an eye on, like you said, all the different aspects. I think it's something that yeah, you really can lose the plot really quickly if you're not on it, if you're not used to it and comfortable in a little bit of that ambiguity. I mean,
Yeah.
even with any live feed, that everybody that's done a live feed knows there's a bit of that lag time. So if you're trying to watch the live feed and run it and moderate it at the same time, it just becomes a you're waiting for those 8 seconds or 6 seconds that are kind of delayed and just seeing if what you're doing is right, and you're on the ball for sure.
Yeah, and James, I can't wait because I think when we come up to Calgary and we're at Bow Valley College, I mean, you have that gajillion-dollar setup of AV that we're gonna get to work with. But I think people need to realize is that as we're running this exercise, the pressure that Alex, James, and then the other members of the team face to give that production quality is not easy. And the first 10 minutes, that's kind of where your heartbeat is at, is that, is this flowing through properly? Because I'm in that moment also where I'm going, do I need to tell everybody, let's take a pause? In Toronto, the first one that we did at the province of Ontario's office, I could do something like, because there's no live physical audience, I could do something like, hey, let's take a moment. Here I can't. So I have to keep that going. And I'll tell you that what happens at that moment is you have that first 5 minutes. And if you lose the audience in that first 5 minutes, it as a moderator, you're effed, right? It's just people are not, you're going to start seeing people walk out. And that's the worst freaking feeling that you can go through. My mentor always tells me clarity cuts deeper than complexity. And I just immediately after this video, the next step that I took was right away just to turn to Alex. And I think it was, I may not recall the exact moment, but I turned to Alex and then I even turned to Shrey and then was just trying to understand what's going on. But you know what was interesting there? Neither Alex nor Shrey knew that I was going to come towards them. I just started to flow and it just happened. You get very lucky in those moments, but you really, really need to realize you've got those first few minutes. Alex, did you get that sense also that early on, there was a risk that we could have lost people? Like, what the hell is going on here? And there was too much sort of stimulation at the start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you were playing some 4D chess there because both you were keeping the audience, guessing what's happening, but you were also having the players, including myself, guessing what was happening. And that's because first the news report came in saying that there's a problem, but we didn't see a problem. None of our data was showing a problem, and I think that actually was really clever because it did two things. First, for the audience, it really demonstrated what reality is. If you've ever seen some of the more corporate tabletops, it's so binary. It's like a detection has been found. We are hacked. Go contain, and that's not reflective of reality. The fog of what is actually happening and the fear of making a bad call really plays well. And for the audience perspective, they were confused because wait a minute, the news is saying this, but the actual telecom representatives are saying another thing. And from a player perspective, I was caught off guard, and you triggered those natural emotions, the racing heart, the cold sweat, the tunnel vision, because I'm needing to perform in front of my peers and a large audience. And I don't want to mess up. And that is so realistic to what actually happens at a business when there is a breach, because there's so much unknown. Maybe an incident response plan has been documented. Maybe they've read through it. Maybe they've even done a tabletop. But in the actual, incident that you will deal with, you'll feel entirely unprepared.
Yeah, and you know what? When I walked in with my hairstyle, I thought I was prepared, and then Alex walked in with his flowing hair and his amazing suit, and you go, "Well, I'm supposed to pick on this person, but he's come like dressed up like no tomorrow, and I'm in my sweater, Uncle Ali trying to defend the North." So, to be honest, James, trust me, you're gonna face this when you come to when ODTN Calgary happens. The first 10 minutes or so really, really challenging. And then, you know what my other fear was? And James, I don't know if this is going to happen in Calgary, but if you look behind you, and this is all around the room, there are mics there. And I know if AV keeps telling me, yeah, the mics are switched off, nobody can turn it on. But guess what? Module 3, somebody does turn it on and decides to ask a question on it, and that disconnects one of our mics. So it's nuts. But anyways, first few minutes, okay, we set the context. There's this thing called ODTN Telecom. People are unable to connect. Something's going on. We don't know what's going on. But the moment you start to get into the flow is when you start to actually go through the first pieces of evidence. siberX team, can we go to, I think it's like the seventh minute. Can we just play that little moment just for like 45 seconds or so? Go ahead. Yeah, roundabout there is
Emily,
fine.
and I can confirm Emily is part of our HR team, although I believe Emily at this point is on vacation. And I have to repeat that Emily's not part of our HR team. Emily is part of our security team, Alex, if I'm not mistaken, and she is on vacation, but she did send an email to HR. And that email said, "Hi team, it has come to our attention that several job postings include detailed information about our network structure and tools. Sharing such specific technical details poses a security risk, potentially exposing vulnerabilities. We must take immediate action to review these postings and remove any technical specifics to safeguard our systems. I've identified 2 postings where this issue is present: network administrator and systems engineer. I recommend that we address this promptly and ensure that all future job descriptions avoid sharing sensitive information. Please
I
let me
remember this
know if
moment.
you'd like to discuss this further. And what I can also bring to the table is that no action was taken on this.
Yeah, we can pause around there
I fail to
because
understand.
yeah, when I go, I fail to understand. You can see I'm looking to my right. I'm targeting Alex. Everyone in the room felt bad for Alex because I had this look like somebody gonna get hurt real bad. But Alex, the truth is that this is what we got into that moment where we started saying everybody was running and gunning down on security. What the hell happened? Why didn't we take down these job postings? It was at this moment when we suddenly got into our flow. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and like this moment here, and this injection is interesting for a couple of reasons. Is this is very common. Businesses, one department is oversharing to the detriment of the sleep of the cyber team. And a company has to manage that risk of what they should be disclosing, what should be more considered confidential. But also somebody will raise a flag, and it's very common in a company to that may just get missed. It is a problem, but it just didn't get ticketed properly. It went into an inbox versus creating a ticket on it. So this is playing really well into common problems that businesses have. Back to the scenario though, what's interesting is this could have been relevant. At this point, we had news saying one thing. The fictitious company set up a war room, brought all the stakeholders together to discuss this, and we're still quite confused what is going on. And this could be a red herring. It's just it's an interesting fact, but we throw that in there and see how our players react to this and whether it's relevant to what we know. And that's a really important piece that at this point, we're in module 1, which is detection analysis. We don't actually know that much information. We have very much secondary and tertiary information, and we're grabbing at straws. And that sometimes leads us down a confirmation bias. We start pulling in stuff like this to fill in the blanks of this narrative that we believe exists now. So that was an interesting angle of bringing this in.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I've always believed the sharper the question, the clearer the answer you can get. But James, and maybe I'll ask you this, James, because this was not, in my opinion, with such limited information by the 8th or the 9th minute, it wasn't a time for security to be talking a lot. But the second something like this comes up, everyone just starts drilling on security. How do you deal with those moments when people want answers? There's a security situation potentially, but you have nothing to say. What do you do in those situations? And really, Alex had to make some stuff up, but at the same time, just had to keep it very, very short. And it was like, does security know what they're doing? And I started making them look bad. How do you deal with that, James?
I think it's a couple things. I think one thing is you have to be able to take that breath ahead of it before you start responding, and I think part of it's actually coming back to the honesty within the response. We don't know, but we're going to be looking into it. I think it gives you a little bit of that space that you'd have to be able to respond to because that's the things there. I think that our inherent expectations that we're going to be working at velocity, right? You're working at whatever the velocity is of the situation. You need to give yourself that little bit of time to be able to say, okay, do it. Can I not just not the singular leader, but my whole team be engaging on this? How do we get them engaged? How do we start saying, is this a false positive? Is this the red herring, like Alex was talking about, and give that little bit of time there while making it look to everyone else around you that you're not doing that. You're actually you're essentially multitasking through it, I think, too, right? So
there was that, and James, I'll tell you, is and full transparency, I had never met Alex before in person, so this was our first time. I got to Vancouver the night before. I was preparing for my PhD exams coming up, so I didn't even come down. I just saw the setup once. I think I saw Alex for 20 minutes. I was like, okay, bye. And then it was just the next morning. And me and Alex, we're not WhatsApp buddies where we're chat signal, but whatever it is, I could tell that there was a little bit where is this about to go? And then Alex's quote unquote partner in defense, Shrey, who plays the technical role of the ODTN telecom sort of security team, he comes up and then he throws another sort of wrench into the whole thing by saying, well, I'm not seeing anything. Everything is absolutely fine. CyberX team, can you go to, I think it was the 15th minute. Shrey brings up his monitoring screen, and I was hoping, I honestly, I couldn't remember everything. I was hoping maybe by this time he would have something to show us, but he had nothing. Take a look.
Right now.
Absolutely, Ali. It should be on the screen very shortly, but as of 9:46 a.m., I in constant touch with the engineers. They have not reported anything as of now. The baseline seems to be normal. As you can see, everything seems to be green. The entire network is properly up and running. I'm not sure how the media is reporting and why they are reporting the outage and downtimes. The amount of alerts we are receiving, they are pretty normal as expected. 20 to 25 per hour, that's something which we are normal at.
Yeah, but Shrey, I'm sorry. You're saying it's looking like normal, but even if I go by one news report, it's reporting an expansive outage. Newman, I don't know how well to read
We
into
can
this
pause
because,
here,
yes,
CyberX team. That's a very good moment and a very awkward capture of my face. But anyways, that's a separate discussion altogether. But you
it
just
looked.
look. One of the things that I was doing is there was a big monitor at the top, which was also relaying the feed, and I was watching the people behind me. So if you see the gentleman behind me, he's deep, intensely in thought. But at that moment, I unfortunately you're reading body language. There's one person behind him who's kind of like, good morning. And then there's another one on the laptop. So you're trying to think, have I lost people? It's really challenging. But this was the moment, I think, Alex, when we started realizing that something's about to hit us. It's gonna come. But everyone around us playing the compliance role, playing the legal role, all of them started to trigger all of these incident response items. The should we call legal, should we not? And I think this was that moment when the crowd began to realize that this security moment is not just, hey, security technical stuff. It involved the entire company. And that's the moment when I think that realness really starts to kick in. And more than that realness starting to kick in, I think one of the things that you noticed also was there was a heavy debate on should we put out a statement or should we not? And Alex, if you recall, security didn't really have much to say. It was PR and communications and legal that were going at it. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, and I was pushing back that, are we declaring a cyber incident? Like, what evidence do we have? We have, an outside source, but all our tools are, providing green across the board. And again, this is to create that, that challenge, right? That you don't want to be sky is falling. And the cyber teams around the world are always the chicken little team that the company gets very frustrated with when they pull the fire alarm when they shouldn't have. So, in this situation, I was actually quite resistant to declaring it. We didn't have enough information. And we were also trying to play on the angle that like this type of up down tooling is, it's very old technology that's been working in telecom space for decades and decades. And there are some challenges with it, right? Like it pulls, maybe it's not as frequent as we would like. So maybe it's a 10-minute pull, a 15-minute pull. So that can create a discrepancy between current state and what the uptime tooling is doing. But cyber criminals have definitely targeted this type of tooling to manipulate it to say everything is good when it's not, to delay a company's response. But that was, one of the main things I was pushing on, that we had all our executives saying, yeah, like, let's do this, communicate. And I asked the dumb question, like, do we actually have a cyber incident? Because we didn't have one now. And of course, we're at siberX conference. It is a tabletop exercise for cybersecurity, but we're trying to delay that to, really follow what would be in an incident response plan, which is, some criteria to declare and then trigger your incident response plan.
And you know what, James, I'll throw you into this very quickly. Is one of the toughest things that you have to deal with in these situations is, when you're role playing, right? So, for example, you have Octavia there, CISO of Equifax, who's playing a different role. For example, I don't recall exactly which role, but let's say they're playing a role like compliance manager, or they're playing a role like a business analyst or something to that effect. I think what we forget that, yes, me and Alex are, self-flagellating on look at how much we had to deal with. But even those who are in those roles, for them to break out of their normal day-to-day thinking and think, quote unquote, in the shoes of someone else, I think that's one of the really big challenges in role playing and why tabletops, when done correctly, can really get people to have those different aha moments. Would you agree?
I would agree. Now, what's interesting though too, it also gives that opportunity to really step up that latent, like just like how we've been trying to train people to run through, instant response tabletops and, don't click the fish, that sort of thing. I think there's also kind of that inherent side of things like talking about compliance, talking about from communications. If you're interfacing with them enough, hopefully you'll start to understand things from their lens as well and bring that to the table too when you come to these. So I think a really good opportunity on that aspect as well.
Yeah, and I cannot tell you how sort of appetizing it is for me, even just like sort of on the main chair, to sort of just continue playing dumb. And that's actually the easy part. It's the moment you have to escape that and start to sort of like, push things, it starts to take effort. And I think one moment which, I enjoyed particularly was we were having this banter. Should we not? Should we declare an incident? And I'm looking at Shrey going, something's going to happen on your screen eventually. And I know it's going to happen. I mean, it's at the end of the day, to some degree, I'm following a script. But, I'll have this play right now. I think it was at around the 22nd minute or something to that effect when one of the players brings up a really important point. Can we just play it at this moment, please? I'm hoping I got the timestamp
And
correct.
Vivek, I might need you to assist in this place
Yeah.
as well. One of the comments that has come in is that at this point, and Richard, you brought this up in our introduction, regulated under federal law, under CRTC, is this the time for us to be sending out any messages or preparing any notes to go out?
We should always be preparing notes to go out regardless of the situation. We should always have those incident response things ready to go. What I will say is it's not just CRTC. There are a number of federal legislative regimes in play. BIPIDA is in play. So we need to ask the questions, are we aware of any inadvertent spike in attempts to access personal information that we control, billing data, subscriber data? Do we know that? If we don't, we need to go take a deep look at it, because if there has been a material breach of data that we are the shepherds of, we need to start preparing mandatory breach disclosure statements to the federal government. And then I'll follow that up just tangentially and say, has anybody called CCCS yet?
We can pause roundabout there.
Vivek,
And I think this was that moment when we just realized the scope of what we're about to be dealing with. Has anybody called CCCS yet? Have we prepared any documentation from CRTC? And honestly, Alex, this was that time when we started going, yeah, maybe we have a larger problem than we think we have. At one end, it's what's going on. Will we see anything on our side? Is there something that we can investigate? But on the other side, there was this whole fear of there's going to be so many federal, provincial, and provider regulatory bodies that are going to come knocking on our door. And I think that was again that moment when folks realized that the minute you're a national infrastructure, it changes the game in terms of how you deal with response. Your thoughts, Alex?
Seldom is a cyber incident strictly a technical problem. And in a highly regulated sector like telecom, you're going to have to answer to a lot of different groups, as Richard was alluding to, both on the privacy side, but also because telecom is arguably a critical service to Canada. They have some obligations to keep that system online and operational. It serves our emergency communications. It serves our economy. So when telecom is impacted, it is generally a much bigger deal than if a private sector enterprise was affected. And that's really where the business is starting to realize and worry about that. We're still on the technical side trying to figure out, is this a technical issue? Is it a cyber incident? But at that point, like the cat's already out of the bag from a public perception perspective. So, legal and PR were right to start, addressing and readying communications and interacting with regulators as needed, just to make sure that they are following the obligations they have, and making sure that they start getting control of the narrative.
Control of the narrative. Now, again, this is a great moment also, James, just so that our audience understands that, yes, there is a script to all of this, but You have to plant and implant certain inject, so on and so forth. Now, James, you've done a lot of like these tabletop exercises. Often, although not in module 1, but in module 3 and then sort of module 4ish, always inject a character who deliberately is just loud, wants to be loud, isn't speaking to be understood, is just speaking to be loud and throwing things off. How important is it to plant that one annoying piece of crap who's just going to be loud, making no sense? How important is it to have that character amidst your incident response when you're dealing with an incident? It's real, but what else does it do to the actual feel of dealing with a cyber incident?
Uh, well, I think it's absolutely key. What it does is it essentially allows you to think like, is this a custom? Think of it not just like, is this like what a customer interaction would be with somebody that's not understanding the technical side of something that's going on. So it's maybe not necessarily within whatever role that they're playing within the tabletop, but it's maybe just adding that friction, adding that mindset that like we can say, okay, yeah, let's take our incident response tabletop, and we'll run our plan through, and everything looks great that way. But that's because everybody wants to get through it and get home and have a nice beer after everything's all done. They don't, they know that the tabletop's coming, and that this is really the simulation that somebody's somebody somewhere in the chain of command is upset, and they just want to be heard, right? Like that's all it is. They just want to be heard. So
I'd also jump in there and say, like, the risk there is like the loudest voice starts driving the group away from what is defined process, the incident response plan that the company has agreed to is the right way to go, generally based off of some industry standard. And that's a big problem. And we see that a lot with, sales or the CEO just saying, like, just get it fixed now, resolve my problem. But they probably don't understand the complexities. In this case, having regulators to answer to and needing to dot the I's and cross the T's. But yeah, that loud voice can really derail following the plan, following even our own muscle memory.
Absolutely. And I'll throw this in there as well, and it's very important. Look, a lot of people that attend ODTN, obviously, there's an experience, there's the learning, but then there's folks who genuinely are coming there to learn how to run a tabletop better within their organization, and some people whose bread and butter is running tabletop exercises, and that's very, very important. One of the things that I don't think people truly appreciate is, while Alex, myself, and a couple of the other chairs are running this, we also have the sponsor community, or the partner community that puts in dollars for these events to take place. Now, weaving them in is always challenging because of two things. Number one is, during ODTN, you'll have at least two different sponsors who are there as industry experts. So you got to weave them in somehow without creating conflict. But the second thing also, and Alex, I don't know how we did it in Vancouver, but it's also challenging to sometimes get perspective from the vendor or the product without them going too much into that product and saying, look, if our product was here, this would never have happened. Do you even recall how we managed to navigate that? Because that was one of our fears.
Yeah, I think generally, the subject matter experts that we bring in are generally, they may be sales adjacent, but they aren't working on the sales team, so they get it. And really, and this is something that I realized, about 15 minutes into module 1, is this is really about bringing my own experience to this narrative. And all the improvisation wasn't imagination; it was all the things that have happened in the last 25 years in my career. And I see that the sponsored subject matter experts want to do the same thing. They want to be part of the story. And certainly, like, again, they make these events happen, and we want to be able to enable them to showcase both their thought leadership as well as gracefully shimming their product into how it could solve the immediate situation of the scenario. But yeah, generally speaking, we're getting some of the best and brightest minds in the industry sitting with us at the table and bringing that experience of real incidents bigger than anything that any of us have ever dealt with. Again, we had people from Google, which is essentially Mandiant, and of course they've done a couple pretty decent incidents in their day.
Yeah, for sure. It was one of those moments, I swear, when both the I think it was Obsidian and I think it was Google on the first module. Again, it's been a while, but there was when they're talking, I take a few notes, and I wanted to say something really, really powerful. I had a note where I said, what, technology can defend, but people must decide, and I totally forgot to say it. And after the module was, I was like, shit, I missed my Socratic moment. But that's what happens when you're running this. And I'll change gears a little bit. James, since you're seeing this, obviously from the outside for the first time, and then we're coming into Bow Valley College in Calgary. One of the things I got to tell you is everything impacts the way you're performing and dealing in a tabletop, from the lighting to, I'll be honest with you, whether you have access to water, the quality of the mics, it all impacts you. And sitting on the outside, can you see how that impacts a person, or is it just like, nah, it's just in mine and Alex said? Because it was really the space really impacted, and there were moments when they dimmed the lights to play a couple of videos, and then they increased the sound for a couple of things. It impacts the way you respond to things. Would you agree, James?
Oh, absolutely. It's the sum of all the parts, right? Like that's really what it comes down to. I mean, even prepping for something like this, even you make sure you're ready, and that if you don't have those things, you're starting to think, oh, I've got cotton mouth, and I have to speak to this, and then you miss that Socratic moment, and hopefully you'll pick it up somewhere else where you can have something that comes off the cuff that'll pick up. And that I think that's the other side of it too, is that, I mean, you talked about, like, you missed that, but I think just being, and Alex has talked about that experience of you being able to bring that experience in, that you can come in and it'll roll off, if in a situation that hopefully that brings something out of it too, that no matter what the sum of the what's going on there, that you can kind of still get through it, and that too.
Yeah, you know what? It's that. Then there's the camera angles that also impact you. And you know what? Look, I'd be lying to you if I told you that, oh, it didn't matter. Like, there were so many times when you would see on the top screen, and because I had three devices in front of me, I was also seeing the live stream. I'm seeing all the different angles. And then as a host, you're also going through this moment. I got to go to the next question, but have they got a good angle of me? Or is that a shitty angle? I want you out of that. So it's very, like, it's playing through your head. Now, look, we've got to cover about 5 or 6 more minutes, but I want to go quickly to this moment when suddenly the Christmas tree lights up. Yeah, that's it. You see what's happening over there, those different angles? Like, it really starts to, like, get to you. And then, my WhatsApp is going off, my Twitter, my LinkedIn is going up. You're going, I can see you on camera, I see you on TV, and it's all playing through your head. But anyways, just if you also look at it, people's looks also impact you. Like Vivek, very, like, the total opposite of me. Vivek's proper, speaking with polished poise. And then you have Octavia, and I'm scared. Like, when Octavia's talking, I'm like, I'm in trouble. I better just listen. So, anyways, let's go to the 41st minute. I think this was the time when finally Shrey starts telling us that there's been some outages. CyberX team, can you go to the 41st minute if you could? It's that moment when Shrey starts to say, yes, we see something is up. I really want to see that moment again. There's Alex again telling me his stories, which I don't believe. Indirectly telling him to go and apply for different jobs on LinkedIn. Yeah, let's go from here.
The question was, are there thresholds for declaring an incident that have been met? Octavia.
So I think at this point we can declare that we may have a operational or technical incident, and we're looking.
I think we can go a little bit ahead, CyberX team, just a little bit. I think shortly after the Shrey comes on, around about here. Yes.
Spikes began a few minutes ago in a couple of devices.
There we go.
I just noticed that the business CPs and the home CPs, which are our premises, on-premise equipments which we have deployed, they have gone offline. When I say offline, the other devices are properly working and functional, as you can see right now, but it's only towards a particular segmented network. Now, there is some anomalous activity. It is possibly some probing that I'm looking at right now, but not a lot. Nothing out of abnormal. We do see these outages every now and then. And when I say every now and then, it means weekly or monthly, once or twice. But again, it may be the same case that we're looking at. As soon as I have more information, I'll provide it back to you.
That
Rob.
sigh, that
So
Now-
the executives is after an update again?
and that's when I look
Also,
back at Alex.
we-
so we
we,
can
uh,
pause roundabout there. You know, Alex, this was that moment when I think I missed something here, and I should have started to go into, well, tell me, do we have any logs? Do we have any beats from these devices? And can we go a little bit deeper? This is one of those moments which is very challenging. Should we probe deeper, or should we just leave it where it's at? And you know what? You're racing against time, right? You have 65 minutes to wrap it all up. There's only so much that you can do. But I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity, no?
Yeah, so and you know what, like I'm actually glad the team got Octavia in there because she brought up a good point, and it was something that I was pushing too, is that just because there's a red blinking light doesn't mean we're under cyber attack.
Yeah.
IT breaks. That's why there's so many people in the industry. And that those two blinking nodes within this big telecom network is much more indicative of localized outage, potentially hardware failure, something at like layer one and not cyber. But we're trying to take the totality of all the evidence, and with the concern of the business being out of compliance or being at the ire of a regulator, we're trying to find that balance. And again, the whole entire time I kept on pushing back, like, do we have enough information to make sense? And lastly, like to your point, what are the logs saying? And at that point, we were part of the scenario was it was dragging out. We weren't seeing anything, at least not preliminarily in the logs to really indicate it. And again, that kept up the mystery, which again is important because I don't think cyber incidents arrive in wrapped bows. Unless it's ransomware, then it is definitely wrapped in a bow for you to deal with.
Yeah, fair enough. And this is the part when, look, I'm just gonna say this is you start to realize also that how communication also acts like a control. Um, when Shrey started saying this is what I'm seeing, he just said this is what I'm seeing, but he needed Alex to add on to that. If Alex didn't add that, hey, if just because it's red doesn't mean something's up. These two things don't correlate, what you're hearing in the media and these other things. And yes, there was a lot of stuff coming from Pearl. And for those of you that haven't watched the module, watch it. Pearl was throwing a lot of threat intelligence stuff saying, hey, there were some suspicious tickets that were open. Hey, we've also been made aware that one of our contractors, something has happened with them. But Alex, if he didn't throw in the fact that, hey, these don't, just because it's of evidence doesn't mean it correlates. But everyone around the table, my job was to rally them on to say, yeah, we want to know more. We want to know more. And that really, really, I think, added to the pressure. There's at least two.
Ali,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll jump in there. One thing
Sure.
that when I worked in a SOC overnight, I had a lot of time to read. And turns out the CIA has a university program and a ton of books. And I came across this book called The Psychology of Intelligence Analysis. And I read it cover to cover because it really applied very much to my job, eyes on glass, looking at all this information, none of it being absolute certainty, and having to understand the biases that I have to make these decisions. And one of the viewers on the stream asks, like, how do you deal with all this information? And that is sort of the problem is there is an information overload or information saturation problem that we're going to deal with on a non-incident day, but during an incident, absolutely. A lot of that information may be irrelevant, red herrings and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's no real great answer to that beyond understanding, the principles of what your role is, what the plan is, what your muscle memory is saying, and trying to do the best for the company and the people of the company is really the only North Star there, because generally you can't do everything right.
Yeah, you can't, and that's the key. And James, I'll tell you one thing which really starts to grip you when you're in this situation is there's the pressure of the audience for sure. There's the pressure of the scenario as it's playing out, but then there's also this thing of, well, what's going to come next? And it was around about this moment when the way the script is written, things now start to cascade. A few things start to happen. One thing leads to the other. And then, when these tabletop scenarios, then it's the pace. There's so much going on. Somebody has to control what is going to happen next. And it's so easy for it to spiral out. I'll also tell you, James, is that one of the biggest challenges, and maybe you can comment on this, that we're about to face both in Ottawa, Vancouver, Calgary, and everywhere else, is we want to weave in more audience engagement. And I have a feeling that while that's going to be fun, I think it's going to take us down different paths that we didn't even see coming. Would you agree?
I would think so. I think it's going to be interesting. It's kind of when we speak to this, it's kind of giving me the imagery of kind of this Loki season 2, trying to keep all narratives brought into that. I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing, is because we are going to be increasing complexity doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree, because I wanted to relate this to a question that's coming from Leonardo, and whoever wants to take this one, right? We're at the tail end now, just 2 or 3 more minutes. The question, I'll read it verbatim. Leonardo says, considering there are so many details to track in each stage, and folks, let me tell you something. I'm going to be very, very transparent about this. For many of the previous ODTNs, it's been played out in my head. We've had the prompts, and then it's kind of visual cues, me, Alex, and Shir. Okay, let's go here, let's go here. We've worked together enough. This time around, just because the sheer volume of attendees and everything that's around it, there is a complete map. But Leonardo asks a fair question. He's like, with so much detail to look into, how do you stay focused without getting overwhelmed? James, I'll go to you first and then to Alex. With so much going on, how do you keep the first things first?
To me, it comes back to the training, right? Like you're still that product of training. So whatever you're going through, and going to take the same thing with incident response. You're just trying to focus on what really matters right out of the gate, and hope that sticks, right? When you're coming into this, I think that it's good to see that the true intent is to try to overwhelm, that there's going to be more things happening. There's more that you want to see happening in the room than what would happen. And nothing's ever truly, like, the issue with tabletops is nothing's ever truly linear, right? So you're trying to do a linear storyline and deal with that in that time. So I think it's definitely comes back to that again, just that training aspect and understanding that you're going to be the product of that. So
I agree. Alex, very quickly, how do you keep first things first?
Again, practice, knowing your processes, knowing what's important, and just like I said, there's no perfect answer here. It is really trying to do what you do best, and then collaborating with risk owners that are going to be sharing some of the risk of the decision to do or do not.
Alex, I'll tell you something that was going through my head at this moment, right? I was waiting for module 3 when I think Newman took over as the chair, and then I sort of just took a back seat and then just, pushed the narrative along whenever I needed to. But I desperately wanted to play another role. And while the exercise was going on, I was thinking, if I was the communications person, and then I think it dawned upon me at that moment that almost everybody who's part of ODTN Telecom right now, especially on the security side, is thinking, holy shit, am I about to lose my job? And, what do you prioritize? It kind of comes down to something I always say in class, which is, do I do the right thing or do I do what's right for my job? And these are the kind of things people are going through. I had to throw in that philosophical nugget, because why not? Because when module 1 comes to an end, it also comes to an end where we're going, holy shit, we don't know much. And I'm going to go ask the siberX team, just if you can go to the 49th minute, to that closing media report, because I think it was this moment when you go, Yeah, there's a lot of things that are about to unfold, and we need a break at this point. You can play it from round about the 49th minute, please, CyberX team. A
On
little
the
more.
ground are starting to report some of the
Probably just a little bit more, CyberX team. Maybe just go just all the way to the final media report if you can. Yeah, there we go. You can play that.
This is Roshan Khan from CyberX News. A government advisory issued days ago warns that advanced persistent threats, also known as APT groups, may be targeting software-defined networking, also known as
Yay.
SDN controllers, a critical component of telecom infrastructure. So far, no response from ODTN Telecom, but cybersecurity experts confirmed that these elite hackers specialize in stealth attacks, exploiting unseen vulnerabilities. If successful, they could disrupt phone and internet services nationwide. Authorities are urging telecom providers to reinforce security, strengthen credentials, and monitor for suspicious activity. We'll continue tracking the story. Stay with CyberX for the latest news.
And then wait for my response to this. It was one of those moments where you're going, yeah, it's coming, right about now.
And that should save the day. But with that said and jokes apart, I'll bring this module to a close by not only
We'll pause
thanking
it
my
over
team from
there.
ODTN Telecom, but
It was one of the it's that moment when you realize, holy crap, you've got the media that's coming up with its own analysis. You have so-called experts coming up there and say, did you know about APTs? And did you know about SCADA networks? And now you realize you're dealing with not just, okay, what's the problem? But there's the customer calls that are coming in, if they can come in. There's the wider outrage that's going on. And then when you go into module 2, you have counselors coming in and complaining. You have mayors that are involved. And then this whole thing cascades into something where you've got a lot of control to put in there. So with that said, Alex, when you look back at everything that transpired in Vancouver, what's one thing you probably would have done differently? Now that you've sort of got a chance to reflect on how Module 1 went. I know we went through very quick episodes and moments of it, but would there be anything that you would do differently?
No, because like you created the scenario where I was put in a defensive position right away, representing the security team that was, was never looked upon positively on a good day, and now when everything is, hitting the fan, what is cyber doing now, right? So, I was playing, a role in bringing back experiences of like having to defend that team, and make sure that they aren't just going on wild goose chases, that they're not just declaring incidents and creating escalations to find out it's yet another false positive and another black eye on the team. But I still feel some chills from the initial 15 minutes of realizing like you're not going to give me the prompts of the logs for me to then say, yeah, there's the bad guy right there on that log line, and realize it was going to be a little bit more of a dance.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It's a little bit it's a little bit of performance. It's a little bit of a dance, and at the same time, there's quite a bit of pressure because you have people in person and online, watching you. James, is this going to be your first ever like public participation in a tabletop?
Yeah, it will be. So it'll be definitely an eye opener, and yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, with that, let me just put it this way. We're going to be over the next 2 weeks, we're going to uncover what happened in modules 2 and 3, and then 4 and 5, and we'll be picking up on certain things and nuances that took place. But I really, really hope that the audience that tuned in today got a sense of, yeah, there's the narrative, but there's all these things that are happening when you're dealing with it in real time. And all of the emotions that we were feeling, you literally feel when you're in the war room, right? It's the exact same feeling. We're people, emotions, you have other things going on. And I'll just add to this is that you're not just there in a vacuum. At the back of my head is I want this to go well so that at 5 p.m. I can go back to my hotel room and study for my PhD exams. Alex wants to go back home so that he can wash his hair. Maddie wants to go out and eat fancy food in Vancouver. Everybody just wants to move on. And it's the same thing when you're in the war room as well. At the end of everything else, Module 1 came to a nice, smooth conclusion. We drank some fancy water, got a break for 35 minutes, but actually, it's not true. Alex and I had to go upstairs for Young Defenders of the North, and that was running at the same time. Shout out to Isaac and all the schools that made that happen. But there was a lot going on at the same time, but we made it through. Hopefully, Module 1 will go just as well in Ottawa. James, Alex, thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for tuning in and playing your role in Operation Defend the North. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.